moderator, panelists and friends. I'm most grateful to Franchise for inviting me from the backwaters of Kerala to come and interact with you on higher education. Many nationalities have many habits about making speeches. The Americans always start with a joke. The Japanese always start with an apology. And Indians normally start with a complaint. But I'm not making a complaint, but what I need to do is to take an anticipatory bail, because I'm new to this area. I've been a diplomat for 40 years, and the last 4 years I've been dabbling in higher education for reasons beyond my control. But of course, I cannot take it as an excuse not to know, because I think 4 years should be enough for one to understand what the issues in higher education is. I'll place my experience in the Kerala context, the strengths and weaknesses of the state in higher education, and I'm sure they are the same when it comes to other states or rest of India and even outside world. And also a little bit about what is expected of us in the 21st century, what kind of graduates we need, and how are we trying to get there. This is really the 10 minutes that I have, I can cover. Kerala model, you must have all heard about. It has of course come to severe criticism recently, because there was a big debate between Amartya Sen and Jagdish Bhagawati as to whether the Kerala model or the Gujarati model is better. But we are not talking about the model in the sense that somebody can emulate it. But we talk of Kerala model in the sense that there has been an exceptional phenomenon. It is not a model, in the sense that with a comparatively low economic growth, we have been able to acquire standards in social, educational and medical fields which might even match the developed countries of the world. So there is a phenomenon which people have not been able to explain fully, and some people even say that this is not a model but just an accident. So whatever it is, if you look back at the educational scene in Kerala, you will find that our statistics at least will show that we are no less developed in social, education and health than the moderately developed European nations. And our economic growth still is slow, but our growth in education and others are good. And this is being attributed to two reasons. One is the very enlightened rulers that we had in the Travancore state, who very early in its history started talking about education, not only about education for all, but also education of women. And it's also which took on the responsibility probably in the history of India, that the Maharani at that time declared that all education expenses should be borne by the state. So they were enlightened enough to do that, and that was the first reason. And the second reason is that we have had the good fortune of welcoming missionaries. Saint Thomas is supposed to have come himself into Kerala in the early Christian era. And therefore they brought with them a certain amount of service, certain amount of interest in social upliftment. And therefore we have had many institutions, and we had a fairly developed education system. And as a result of this, we have accomplished two of the three things that we always talk about when we talk about higher education, that is access, equity and excellence. And we have been able to manage access, certainly, and equity is inborn in the system in Kerala with all this diversity. But excellence is what we are searching for, and how to bring about this, because we are not on any lists of world famous universities. Even Indian universities are not there, Kerala universities are not there, even in the Indian lists. But that does not mean that our education is inadequate. In terms of teaching, in terms of giving fundamental education particularly at undergraduate level, Kerala is not bad, judging from the fact that it is the Kerala graduates who have done extremely well wherever they have been able to flourish, whether it is the United States or anywhere else. people have been able to do extremely well because of the basic quality of the education which was available. And now comes to the requirements of the 21st century. When it comes to that, we are unable to cope as yet. And what are these things that we are trying to accomplish? First and foremost is a kind of accepting a paradigm shift in education, which we have not yet done, and which means that you need a multidisciplinary knowledge, which is very essential for the 21st century. And this is something we have not been able to accomplish because we are still in the science, arts, humanities mood, and there is no way that people can mix courses. We have something called choice-based credit system, but the choice is not yours. The choice is done by the university or by the authorities. And therefore, a multidisciplinary knowledge we have not been able to acquire. We do not have a system of lifelong learning, which is again very essential for 21st century graduates. English education is not inadequate, but the quality is falling because of the emphasis given to the vernacular language, and it has become a Shrestha Bhasha. So there is a certain amount of pseudo-nationalism involved, and therefore the standards of education, English education, is falling in Kerala. And then, of course, the emphasis that we need to do on morality and social responsibility is very significant. And also creating an awareness of the Indianness. So these are some of the things that our graduates require to live in the 21st century. I did not mention technology. Technology, of course, is developed in Kerala. We have the best connectivity available in any part of India. But unfortunately, our IT development is meant for the development of the United States and not for us. Because everything that we do in technology is exported, because Americans sleep when we work, and therefore we are able to fulfill a requirement of the United States. But technology is not being used in ordinary governance and also, unfortunately, in education. So these are the problems that we have. Of course, we have the advantage of literacy. We have the advantage of people have knowledge skills. We also have a huge diaspora all around the world telling us what to do. All these advantages we have. But the disadvantages are, I'm sure, must be there elsewhere also. And first and most important disadvantage is, it is very difficult to reform education, an institution of that kind. Those who have done management must have heard about the established enterprises. Innovation is difficult to bring about in established enterprises. The famous example of Coca-Cola changing its taste and having to run back to classic Coca-Cola within a year is a very good example of how innovation sometimes does not work in established enterprises. And education is an established enterprise. And what are the definition of an established enterprise? First of all, it enrolls large numbers. Secondly, anything that changes will have an impact on a whole generation of people. And third, it is very expensive. And the fourth is, there is no mindset for change. So these four reasons are really militating against complete reform in education. But what we need, not only in Kerala but also in India, is a complete transformation, what I call higher education 2.0. Because elsewhere in the world they are talking about higher education 3.0. So we have not been able to accomplish even 2.0 because of all these constraints that I mentioned. And what are we doing about it? We have identified 6 areas in which we need to work very hard and urgently and concentrated fashion. First is infrastructure. Kerala has beautiful buildings, beautiful private colleges, institutions, but government institutions do not have even benches to sit on, not to speak of chairs. So there is an immense amount of money required in infrastructure. Of course, we can take consolation in the fact that you can have high thinking and low living, but I don't think it is workable in the present world. And the second is teachers. We do not have adequate teachers training programs. In fact, one profession for which you need no training in Kerala is to be a teacher in a university. You don't need any training at all. And this is a major handicap. And then the third is, of course, technology. Use of technology is extremely inadequate. And therefore, you have the MOOCs courses, you have the flip schools, we have so many ways in which we can expand the horizons of our teachers, but use of technology is very inadequate, not because they don't have computers, not because we don't have connectivity, but because there is no sense of commitment to a technology revolution. People say that the technology revolution came without a user's manual, and that is the problem. We don't have a user's manual to deal with technology. Technology just overtook us, and we are still struggling to find where to use technology and how. And so we are trying very hard in order to bring technology to the people. You may have a classroom, smart classroom, but most of the time it will be switched off. The computers are covered in plastic with a flower pot on top of it, and that is a scene that you see in universities. So a complete transformation is necessary to make them use technology. Then research. Research is probably the weakest. Generally in India, that's why we do not get Nobel Prizes. And in Kerala, we don't even have patents, because research is considered to be a gathering of information. Any thesis that you want to read, you will find that all the information available on that particular subject is put together to suit a particular thesis, and that is all that happens. There is no creation of new knowledge. There is no creation of new processes, new products in the universities. Not that we do not have research institutions, we have, but they work independently and they do not really focus on education as such. So research has to be completely transformed. Of course, you all know about the rankings and so on, world-class universities. They are all based on research. They are all based on citations and not based on teaching. And that's one of the reasons why our IITs, even though they are doing a lot of research now, have not yet reached that level of world-class, because they have not produced Nobel Prize winners, etc. So research is absolutely essential. And then autonomy. The point I made earlier of the Maharani saying that all education is the responsibility of the government, and therefore the government must take over it, is something which is ingrained in us. And therefore, we do not aspire to autonomy. We expect the government to do everything for us, and we are all quite comfortable. You must have all heard about the temple in Trivandrum, Lord Padmanabha's temple. And now we know, of course, Lord Padmanabha has plenty of money. He is supposed to have something like $45 billion on which he is lying, and it cannot be used for any purpose, etc. But the belief has always been that Padmanabha will take care of us, even before we knew he had so much money. And so that mindset is very much there, and therefore we seek protection of the government, seek protection of the authorities, and people do not have the inclination to exercise autonomy. And we have, for the first time in history, we have introduced autonomous colleges in Kerala, just a few of them, about 30 of them, and there is big resistance. In fact, every day I have demonstrations outside my office saying, we do not want autonomy. It is almost like Mahatma Gandhi saying, we do not want freedom for India. But this is true. And so, and the sense of autonomy that we have to bring in, because people don't trust each other. I do not trust my teacher, but I always trust somebody who I do not know. And the teachers equally, they don't feel confident to evaluate their students or to decide what they should teach the students. So autonomy is a very difficult process, maybe unlike other places and other countries. And lastly, internationalization. How much linkages can we have with universities outside India? And this is something which is totally lacking. We have some foreign students, odd foreign students in Kerala, but we do not have the kind of internationalization, the kind of link-ups that we have with other universities. Not that the others are not willing, but so far we have not had enough seats for students, particularly in technology, and therefore we have never developed a culture of inviting students or professors from abroad. Kerala has been able to establish what is called health tourism, because the word tourism may be wrong there, But people do come from all over the world because the cost is much cheaper than anywhere else, and the quality is as good, if not better, when it comes to healthcare. And the same thing we need to accomplish in education. From education tourism or familiarization kind of things that we already have, to graduate into transfer of credits. And that we did for the first time again in the history. This year, for the first time, we were able to transfer credits to a university in the United States. So these are all the kind of efforts we are making. But two things we lack, like everybody else, I suppose. The two M's I talk about. First is the mindset, and the second is the money. So unless you have these two things, we often have the money, but we do not have the mindset because of all the problems I raised. We call ourselves very modestly as God's own country because we leave everything to God. We do not tend to work very hard for it. And we hope and pray that God will one day reform our education. But the good news is that we have made a very modest effort. And from my experience, in fact, I was brought into education because they felt that somebody who has seen the world might be able to bring in some changes. But I told the Chief Minister, this does not seem to hold good here because people seem to be very suspicious of everything that you try to bring about. Because they'll always find an excuse to say how we are unique and these changes are not acceptable for us. So even if the money, the mindset is an issue, and I'm sure it must be an issue everywhere else in the world, and that is what we are struggling with. But I think we have made a beginning. And we never had private universities in Kerala. They are banned till today. But now we are working on private universities, trying to bring in private universities. We are doing nobody has done in India yet of a complete study of research in universities. And when that report comes, I think it will be useful not only for Kerala University but for others. So we have all these contradictions. We are very early in our reform process on the one hand. On the other hand, we have some accomplishments to share. But the hope is that we will be able to produce graduates for the 21st century. Because in Kerala, at least 40% of our graduates work abroad or work outside Kerala. Therefore, we simply cannot afford not to have the graduates. We are going to have 96 million young people by 2020, and unless they are equipped to do the jobs of the 21st century, I do not think we'll be able to make use of the demographic dividend. And that is the effort we are making. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Sreenivasan.